we can't but conclude that what they're doing is an assault on their own humanity. When you kill without mercy, when you don't see the humanity of even children to the extent of celebrating their own starvation, which is what we've seen in this war. They are celebrating the starvation of children. They are celebrating the demolition of hospitals and so on. I mean, in essence, it's an assault on their own humanity when they do so.
Pastor, how do we deal emotionally with everything we've seen in the last 2.5 years?
Well, I can mainly answer this question from my own position as a man of faith, which is to really ask myself, this is the time when everything I believed in comes to question, and is it relevant? Does it help? Does it make any sense? And I found myself relying so much on my faith in the last 2 years to survive this moment, not just for myself, but for the sake of those around me, those I pastor, my friends, my family even. I found myself, as I said, relying more and more on my faith, the goodness of God and the justice of God. It's in those days, as you all know, all of these things were tested. But I've also realized something important especially in the last 2 years, but beyond that, honestly, which is we have so many things that we can do that rather than focusing on the things that are beyond our own capacity. Why can't we do the things that we can do? Talking about human responsibility. Many times the things, for example, in my position, the questions I hear in which people blame God, and I understand why people blame God. Believe me, I have, made my own questions to God and my own anger and frustrations. But there are certain things that we can do ourselves. So rather than blaming God, we need to look in the mirror. A genocide is actually one of those moments because it's not an earthquake or a volcano that killed more than 100,000 people. We fear even much worse than that. It's a human-made genocide, even worse, something that we watched live on earth. Each one of us from his or her location could do something. And I've learned that rather than, eating ourselves from qahr, from anger, from anguish, from frustration, what can we do? And that's, I've always say to my folks, you need to channel all of this anger that you have into action, into helping others. Sometimes it's a simple thing as a phone call, as as simple as a social media post. In my case, a prayer, strong prayer in which we insist and demand, but then each in our own position, capacity, whether it's advocacy, making a phone call to a politician and so on, everyone had a role to play. And let's not underestimate the role of the demonstrations. So the hundreds of thousands around the world, the millions who demonstrated, made a difference. And so how do I deal with this? I rely on my faith, but then I channel all of that into action and ask myself, what can I do? Can I do more? Can I be more effective in what I'm doing, given that we are all in this together?
I mean, I have to admit, before October 7th, I wasn't the most religious man. But in the wake of seeing all the horror, it seems impossible really to function without this idea, at least, of a higher being, of a higher purpose, just to, I guess, not succumb to despair in that sense. And it's almost quite ironic, because I think for a lot of people, the nature of suffering on this planet is proof for a lot of atheists that God doesn't exist and that he's not benevolent.
No.
How do you...
I would argue the opposite. I would argue the opposite, because if all of this suffering is in vain, is vanity, is worthless, is meaningless, then do I even want to go on living in this life? If we have to address these existential issues, these real pain issues of injustice and anguish and pain, with the knowledge that ultimately there is no God, no meaning, no justice, then everything we do is in vain. Then why do I even advocate for a ceasefire? It's worthless. There is no meaning in goodness. There is no meaning in life. And I would even argue that if there is no justice, if there is no just God, then all of this is in vain. We don't need to advocate for a ceasefire. In many religious circles, let me talk about, in Christian circles, many times people even hesitate accepting the notion of a God who judges humanity or who judges nations. And I would say, when you say this much evil in the world, let's go to the extreme, whether it's a genocide or even let's point to the Holocaust, someone like Hitler, the millions of people he killed, Jews and non-Jews. Imagine if we face that question, knowing that, there is no justice that will ultimately, that Hitler has to face. And then I talk about all of us, including those who commit war crimes. So to me, approaching all of this, wrestling with these questions, as difficult as they are, if I don't know that God exists and he's a good and just God, then that will make it even 10, 20, 100 more times more difficult. And in the end, don't ask me, ask those who are going through these times. Did the people of Gaza lose their faith in God, or did they keep and rely on their faith in God? You see them coming from the midst of the rubble and literally saying, sometimes they would say, Nushkur Allah, or which thank God, or Hasbunallah wa ni'mal wakil, we rely and we let go everything on God. So those who go through these things actually don't ask these existential questions. And atheism doesn't help them, I would argue. Rather, their belief in God helps, and their belief in ultimate goodness and ultimate justice that enables them to be more patient, endure more, and never lose the hope.
How do you deal with the hatred, I guess? Because it's, if you would even call it that, because, with everything, especially when you're not in Gaza and you're watching it, it's impossible not to feel certain ways. How can you channel that into something, I guess, a bit more constructive?
First, we have to fight against numbness, I think. This war has lasted for 2 years, and I think all of us, if we're honest with ourselves, most of us at least, are guilty of having less and less, giving less and less attention to the tragedy in Gaza. And I remember how many times we cried in the first few months from the images we've seen. The killing did not stop. Actually, it became worse, became starvation. And there is always the tendency to turn the channel. And that's the first thing we have to worry against and be careful. Because if we continue just turning the channel because we're too much disturbed by these images, then, we become desensitized. We grow numb. And I would say even it's an assault on our own humanity when we stop feeling with others. So we can't. We have to first continue watching and not turn the channel. At the same time, we have to make sure that it does not translate into, this is where, again, this is my own faith values, that I don't turn this into not just hatred, but, emotions of revenge. Because it's going to kill us first. It's going to kill us from the inside. And those who are doing the killing could care less about how we feel. And it's not going to help those who are victims. What will help them is our action, is how we channel that anger, that pain that we feel, those emotions of solidarity into actual acts of costly solidarity. I don't think people want in Gaza benefit from us sympathizing with them. It's good. They want us to translate it into action. So we have to think of the victims themselves and not make it about us. And so many times we're so good at making everything about how we felt when we saw the images and how we reacted. But, remember, it's about them. It's about the people in Gaza themselves. How do we help them? What can we do to stop it? Even if it's a simple prayer, even if it's a simple act of sharing, of advocating, of demonstrating. All of these actions work, even giving. So the real challenge is to translate all of these emotions positively into acts of goodness. And finally, I think we need to remember that wars are never the solution. As much as we hate war, we can't fight it with another war. And that's the role of people of faith, to help the world envision an alternative reality in which we don't have to kill one another to survive. It's difficult to say, especially in the midst of a genocide, because our main tendency is to, respond to violence with violence. The ideology we are facing is not just hateful, but wants to erase us. And if we resent such an ideology and see its dangers, our response can't be to replicate it, but to challenge it. And I wish the rest of the world sees that, how dangerous ideologies can be, because it's not that we're facing the war on Gaza, the genocidal war on Gaza, is a translation of the Zionist ideology. It's been nurtured for years. And we've been saying that for years. So my point is, we have to, as difficult as it is, especially these days, to rise above all of that and make sure we don't respond to evil with evil. And that's at least part of our, that's my belief. That's our, at least in my case, that's our Christian values.
How do you, if we look at the other side of things, from ourselves onto them, so to say, how do we, because there's many ways that people sort of evaluate or psychoanalyze, I guess one could say, the soldiers carrying out the atrocities or the people cheering it on from afar. So I'd like to ask you, how do you feel for them? And in turn, how do you respond to their hatred?
I mean, let's be clear. We should understand the question, of course. Our main concern should be to stop the acts and to save lives, of course. To condemn and make sure what they're doing does not last. At the same time, analyzing this from outside, we can't but conclude that what they're doing is an assault on their own humanity. When you kill without mercy, when you don't see the humanity of even children to the extent of celebrating their own starvation, which is what we've seen in this war. They are celebrating the starvation of children. They are celebrating the demolition of hospitals and so on. I mean, in essence, it's an assault on their own humanity when they do so. But of course, right now, I feel, we need to stop this and then find ways maybe to liberate even our own oppressors from their own assault on their own humanity. Ultimately, I believe that the only way forward, because right now they're caught into this, they don't see otherwise. They believe what they're doing is the right thing. But deep inside, I think they will one day come in terms with the evilness of their actions. And to do so, I don't think rationalizing at this time works. I don't think trying to reach. I think the only way is sanctions. The only way is even holding those who committed these crimes accountable. I think only when the Zionists in Israel are forced to think of their own ways, when they are isolated, when they are sanctioned, and they begin to see the impact on their livelihood, economy, and so on, only then they will be forced to think about the reality. And that's why, to be honest, it's we keep saying, if there is any hope we find in the future, is these grassroots movements that call for boycotting, sanctioning, and divesting. Israel will continue to do what it's doing as long as they are never held accountable. We see this, and we've been saying this, by the way, before the war, but even more so before the war. And the scary part is now in the psyche of Israeli politicians, we could destroy Gaza, kill more than 100,000 maybe, and can get away with it. Why not do it in the West Bank? That's the scary part. That's why we hope, the international community pays attention. It's the scary part and it's a depressing part. I hope they pay attention to really the consequences of having no accountability when it comes to committing war crimes. So how do I, reach out? I don't think this is the time, or the only thing that will work right now is sanctioning Israel, boycotting, and so on.
Would you say evil is winning on planet Earth today?
I would say we are allowing it to win as a humanity. We are letting it win because of our selfishness, our greed, our own bigotry and racism, our own sense of supremacy. The fact that we're not living up to the faith values we all believe in, and that's a tragedy of all of that, is, we fight in the name of the divine, yet go against everything that's in our sacred books. I can, definitely point at my own tribe, the Christian world, especially those who support Israel, by going against the core, basic 101 teachings of Jesus, which shocks me. So if evil is winning, it's because of us. It's definitely gaining grounds. However, what I can say with certainty, again, relying on my faith, is that the final word will always be for truth, for justice. That light will always overcome darkness. We don't see it now, but we can't lose that faith. We can't lose that faith, because if we do, not just we turn into despair, but then, we might as well join the other side, if there is no meaning and there is no. So relying on my faith, I can say, and this is something I've been preaching about and emphasizing in my talks, the final word will always belong to justice. The final word will always belong to life, not to death, to light, not to darkness, to truth, not to vain. So we have to keep that faith in mind. I'm truly convinced of that.
You touched on hope at the beginning of that answer there, and on the previous answer as well. And moving away from, I guess, this more emotional side of things, I guess a source of hope for me, at least, has been, I guess, this growing dichotomy, I guess, amongst the Christian group in the US of what was once fanatical Zionism, Christian Zionism, that you also touched on, to now this growing movement away, I guess. I wouldn't even really know how to describe it. I guess in a sense, unity. I guess they're looking out for Christians across the world and seeing how we can protect them, or how they, as American Christians, can. And so I'd like to ask you whether you also see this as a source of hope, considering you were also on Tucker Carlson's show, which in the end, I think, brought a new perspective and an unheard voice for millions of people.
Yeah. Hope is a strong word to use. Right now, it's I don't want to exaggerate the impact of that, but and it's tragic that the cost was so high. What happened in Gaza, it had to happen for minds or hearts to open and minds to open. However, if you look at the trajectories, but the studies, it clearly showed that even before the war, some in the right were beginning to shift their attitudes, motivated by different things. You mentioned their concern for Christians around the world. That is definitely one element, but it's not always the element. But there is also the America First people in the United States who think, why are we giving all of this money to United States? There is always politics in it. For example, is the Gulf countries a better ally for us than Israel, and so on? And certainly some who are beginning to question, why are we giving the money to a country that's committing genocide or committing these horrible crimes? And for the first time in maybe history, I don't know, we're seeing not just high-profile media figures call out Israel for the crimes they're doing. I'm talking people from the right. You mentioned Tucker, but there are others. But we're also seeing the results on the ground in terms of the surveys and the studies. They all show that there is a big seismic shift among young Republicans, young evangelicals, when it comes to their attitudes on Israel. There isn't enough studies yet as to exactly why is this happening. We don't know the exact motivation of every individual or that segment of young people, why they're shifting. And not all are just super excited about or are passionate about justice for Palestine. Let's be clear. But the shift in attitude is promising for sure. It's important to capitalize on that by reaching out to that segment of society. And interestingly, Israel is already publicly talking about pouring hundreds of millions of dollars towards reaching and changing the perception, which is ironic because, you commit a genocide and then you don't want people to have negative attitudes towards you. It's really shocking. But it shows how much what we've been saying is that Israel has invested so much in its efforts to alter reality and to deceive. There is a different altogether. I travel a lot and I talk to churches and I meet people all the time. And I continue to be shocked by the level of ignorance people have about what's happening in Palestine. The breakthrough in the war on Gaza is that the Gazans themselves had cell phones, and could show the world what's really happening. And finally, people were paying attention and listening. Sadly, it's because of the severity of the images. So that was, as if, Israel lost its monopoly on the narrative and its capacity or ability to continue to deceive people. So yes, in that sense, maybe there is hope that people are finally opening up and beginning to realize something is wrong in the narrative we've adopted, even in the worldview we have adopted.
So I've just got time for one more question, I guess. We saw recently, a few days ago, the Christmas lights in Bethlehem were lit up again after 2 years of genocide. And so I'd just like to ask you as my final question, what message does this send to Israel, but also the outer world? But also, what is your Christmas message? I guess by the time this episode comes out, it will be Christmas Eve. But what is your message from Bethlehem, the birthplace of Christ, as we end 2025?
That's interesting. I haven't thought about my Christmas message this year. Let's see how things develop from now until Christmas. It's almost 2 weeks. You've asked me what our message is. I think our message to ourselves has to be first about our own resilience as people, and that we're still here. I hope we finally understand that we are facing an opponent that seeks to eliminate us. They are public about it. They're not hiding their intentions. They talk about voluntary immigration, but on the ground, they're creating circumstances of life that are pushing us from our land. They are pushing us out one family at a time. So for us as a small Christian community, part of the Palestinian people, to insist that, no, we're still here. And we still feel this pride of being the inheritance of this important tradition to carry the witness from the place where it all began, from the birthplace of Jesus, to say we're still here, we're resilient, we're still celebrating Christmas, we're still lighting trees. No one is fooled. The war is not over, we know. And no one is fooled that the siege is not over. We live in big prisons in the West Bank, whether it's Ramallah or Bethlehem. We know the reality. But we're I think, reminding ourselves of the strength, the resilience of our communities, of the importance of the message. So celebrating this year in itself is a message of Sumud's resilience for the Palestinian people. It's a message to the world that we're still here. I hope it's a reminder to the world that Bethlehem is a real place with real people. It's not just a fairy tale, about this nice city in 2,000 years ago. No, it's still a town with people with real struggles. And the message we're sending is that we're not going anywhere. We will keep telling the story of Bethlehem. An important story, by the way, for our season, because at the heart of the Christmas story is a child who challenged an empire. At the heart of the Christmas story is the story of an empire who was threatened by a child and tried to kill him, was so paranoid over its throne that it committed this massacre against the children of Bethlehem. At the heart of the Christmas story that the Bethlehemites will continue to tell is a story of a message of peace on earth, peace that does not come through force. It's definitely not the peace of Rome, the peace of Caesars, but the peace of this little vulnerable child who was a refugee, who was born in a very simple family. So we must continue to tell the story. And the people of Bethlehem, the people of Palestine will continue to tell the story, remind the world of our faith values, of our beliefs, and of the particularity, the uniqueness, the power of this Christmas story, namely that the good news and that peace is found in the vulnerability of this little child. It's an important message for our world today, where empires are rising again and where we listen about this whole concept of peace through force and so on. That's the exact opposite of the Christmas story. So I'm glad we're still telling that story. I hope the world listens.
Pastor, thank you so much for your time today.
Thank you.